Welcome back to Type 40 for Whoveember. Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks here. And this time, there's something from Comics Corner, Comic Book Corner. Usually I'm sat in the corner of my place, tucked away there with a reading lamp on and maybe with a drink and a graphic novel or a floppy. Steady on, not that kind of floppy. But indulging in my love of the sequential comic book art form. This time, though, I've roped in Gary Akers and John Yulden to get stuck in and compare notes and takes on a seminal slice of Doctor Who's long history in comic book form. You've always been comic book fans, haven't you? Gary, I know you've talked to me about comics before on this very channel, haven't you?
Absolutely, since I was Time Tot. You know, I mean, all kinds of, you know, from Casper up to Archie, up to Marvel, up to, you know. First of all, let me really quick, Dan, thank you so much for having me as part of your great 60th anniversary celebration, talking about one of my favorite things, Doctor Who comics. And there's so much to choose, decades of Doctor Who comics that you could, like, you're right, you could plant yourself in a corner for, you know, just get order in food for a couple of months.
That's it.
And just sit there and
just leave me here. I'll be okay. You can go to the bingo, love. You can go out with your friends. Yeah, it's been like that. How about you, John? Are you a comic books guy as well?
Yeah, I love comic books. Since I was a young nipper, you know, I started with Spider-Man in the comic books and in the 80s, and sort of just it grew from there, really. And you know, what we're going to talk about is it's that classic, you know, winter evening. It's dark outside. I've got the torch on under my quilt, reading the comic strip of Doctor Who. You know, it's part of my British folklore.
When two of your loves sort of combine, Doctor Who and comics sort of meet, and magic happens. Yeah, we're a day away now from the first episode of the Doctor Who 60th anniversary event series screening. 3 episodes make up this series, all written by Russell T Davies, but one does bear this familiar title. The Star Beast airs on Saturday, the 25th of November 2023, and it's based on the comic strip from all the way back in 1979. And I've got a little bit of a blurb here. This is what the synopsis of it is, just in case you haven't read it for a while. It says, pursued by Wrath warriors, Beep the Meep crashes his spacecraft in Black Castle, where he is found and hidden by school children Sharon and Fudge. Fudge? Really? The Doctor. There was a kid at my school nicknamed Fudge, but I think that could have been for a completely different reason. It was very nasty. All happened on a school trip one day. Those coaches, because they get quite hot in those coaches, any smell can, anyway, I'll tell you later. The Doctor follows the flames of the neutron drive Star Cruiser and investigates, unaware that he is leading the Wrath warriors directly to the Meep. So this is The Star Beast, written by John Wagner and Pat Mills, penciled and inked by Dave Gibbons. All comics heavyweights, everybody. All big Doctor Who fans tied to this brand. Wagner and Mills, they'd submitted 4 scripts to the Doctor Who production office before this made it to comic book form. All of them eventually ended up in the pages of Doctor Who Weekly in one form or another, whereas Dave Gibbons, who would later go on to great things in the 80s, the 90s, and still at the top of his game now. He's like 74 years of age, but still one of the best in the business. He'd been working at 2000 AD very happily on Dan Dare and all that kind of thing, but really wanted a new gig. And eventually they found a home, didn't they, with Doctor Who Weekly under the legendary editor Des Skin. So this was a combination of major talents, wasn't it, at exactly the right time to work on a strip that was just one part of one magazine. That I suppose, John, that Doctor Who Weekly, as it was at the time, there was lots of comics like this around, weren't there? There were combinations of comic strip material. Some of it was new, some of it was reprinted. There was articles, there was puzzles. So this was pretty much standard fare in newsagents all over the UK, wasn't it, Doctor Who Weekly?
Yeah, it was, definitely. And I came to the Star Beast quite a few years later as well. And that was a reprint that I picked up late 80s. So that's the first time I got to it.
Because this has been reprinted. I mean, it shouldn't be any great surprise that Doctor Who should come to this sooner or later. This is the story that won't go away, isn't it? It's always talked about, and it's never out of print. This has probably there's been collected editions of it now, probably since the year after it was originally printed, and this is the very latest that you've got here. What's the title of this one? What's it exactly called?
It's the Fourth Doctor anthology from Panini. And yeah, it's got you'll probably see there, but they've labeled, you've got the Star Beast in there, the Iron Legion, you've got a few others as well. So it's just, if you love the Fourth Doctor comic strip, it's got everything in there.
And isn't there a flash on the cover there to say that the Star Beast is there somewhere?
There is. So if you can see it
there.
Oh, there you go.
So it's a collected edition of the two softbacks that came out around 20 years ago, Gary. That I know that you've got this too, haven't you? So there's two of these. When you put them together, they make up the whole of the Tom Baker run of books. But fabulous to see it coming around again. And I have been thinking about dipping and buying again, but I force myself not to, because there's nothing wrong with these. But I do keep this in a nice dust jacket, Gary, the way you do a textbook at school or something that's got plastic coated.
Yeah. I think, you mentioned Iron Legion. I think Iron Legion, which is the first of the 4 Mills Wagner stories, that's got to be like the most reprinted Doctor Who comic story ever. And probably Star Beast is a close second.
Yeah.
So when you first came across the Star Beast, then John, you said that was in a reprint. That was in a collected form as well.
Yeah, it was, and I just fell in love with it straight away. As a kid, I think I must have read it about 50 times over the following weeks, just because I enjoyed it. Because again, Pat Mills, John Wagner, and Dave Gibbons, they would go on for me to be, very influential in the comic books that, I would read over the years. And just, I loved the fact that they'd taken this form where the Doctor always tries to help world's people against more advanced evil creatures. And here they were flipping it, and they were going, right, okay, this creature is pretending to be cute, but is actually evil. And I just got blown away with it. And it's still number one for me after years.
It's the simplest idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Simple but effective.
And we've mentioned 2000 AD. I mean, John Wagner created Judge Dredd, and Pat Mills wrote for a long time right after that initial creation, and then Wagner came back and then wrote Dredd for years and years and years and years. And they created so many other memorable characters in 2000 AD. So they took that. I mean, these 4 stories, I know we're going to just focus on the Star Beast, but these 4 stories really seem like 2000 AD
I agree.
meets Doctor Who. I mean, Iron Legion, you have a Rome that never fell, and now there's alien mechanical, Rome, and then the City of the Damned, where emotion is outlawed, and you have these blood bugs attacking, and then here you have the the mixture of the fantastical but set in an identifiable setting, and then in their last story they have like space truckers fighting. It's total 2001 done in Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say quickly one bit in the Star Beast that I've always loved since I was a kid. You've got the Meeps invading planets, right? Yeah. And you've got an executioner, and the thing the executioner says as they're being led up is hoppity hop, boppity bop, who's next for the chop? And that is just that's just great. I love it.
Straight out of British comics of the 60s, the 70s, maybe even the 50s. It's got that Beano sensibility. And looking at the Star Beast generally, I think this is the most Doctor Who-y of them all. I don't think it's as high concept. I don't mean that as a slight on it at all. In fact, I think because it's not high concept, I think it works better as Doctor Who than the other 3 stories, because it's so domestic. I mean, the thing that struck me about it as I was reading it and poring over every single panel of this beautiful artwork was that even though the spaceships are spectacular. The spaceships when they crash, when they're fighting, or just when they're hanging there in space. It's just beautiful. As much as there's all of that, and the creatures are wonderful. Little details that their tongues have got limbs, kind of fingers and things. All those little touches like that are great. But as much as I enjoyed that, I loved that it takes place on street corners or over back fences. There's washing lines. There's Fudge's aunt with a fag hanging out of her mouth, like Les Dawson Dawson and the Roy Barraclough characters. It's all a little bit Coronation Street, even. A lot of it happens at night. Rows of terrace houses. There's a mural, in fact, there's ducks on the wall in one of the houses too. And there's a vegetable patch. There's all those kinds of things that you associate with 60s and 70s Britain.
And I've got another favourite quote of mine going into what you've just said. Okay.
Yeah.
Mrs. Higgins, there are aliens at the bottom of your garden.
Yeah.
Doctor said, perfect.
And the genius, that's one of the geniuses of this story. Not only Dave Gibbons' art, I think Dave Gibbons, for me, is the supreme Doctor Who comic artist, followed closely by John Ridgway later in the Colin Baker era. But the fact that, and you mentioned the ship stand, I got to say really quickly that as I was rereading it this week, the first splash panel, which is the neutron star crashing,
amazing.
I basically spent about 10 minutes just looking at the ship, the design of the ship, and how it made sense, where the different engines, the way the engines were designed, and later on the Warath ship. He took the time to actually make these ships look like they would work, in terms of their function, their design, whatever, which shows what a craftsman he was. But also the fact that this story is set, as you said, in familiar surroundings, and the fact that the two, Sharon and Fudge, so you have a boy and a girl, so you've got that covered, pretty much the same age or just a little older than the primary readership of this magazine.
They're meant to be about 14 to 15, aren't they?
You talk about every reader, every young reader would want to be one of those two characters in this story. I discovering this alien. So you talk about seeing yourself in a story. It was, to make it that identifiable to where every young reader could identify with one of those two characters. The boy who knew all about science fiction was so proud of it.
Yeah, he uses expressions like BEMs, doesn't he? And he mentions when he sits in the cockpit of the Wrath Warriors spacecraft, he starts working the joystick. Luke Skywalker sort of got nothing on me, that kind of thing.
It's not a space rocket; it's a starship. Get it right. Those kind of things. And then Sharon, who is intolerant, who thinks it's silly. It's like, oh, come on, Fudge, you still read these comics? Every boy or girl either was that character or knew somebody who was that character, which is genius, because then that makes the story not only live more for you as you're reading it, but it makes it stick in your memory forever after.
What struck me about those two characters as well, John, is looking at Doctor Who's history in comic books as well, how it had started within a year of it being on the television, and Doctor Who, the William Hartnell Doctor Who, when they put him into comics at TV comic, it's aimed at a younger age group, but he's also put with two school children as his companions. There's John and Gillian, who are supposed to be his grandchildren, but they are probably around 10, 11 years of age, much, much younger, and there's that kind of very patriarchal feel to it. And this could almost be the same two characters kind of aged up. It's a very similar dynamic, but post the Graham Williams era. What was the Williams era still on?
This would have been right during season 17.
Yeah. So we're actually, just as the Williams era was coming to a close, it taps into it. It aligns that same dynamic, as just as you say, Gary, this is the people who are buying this comic, who are buying this weekly, that can relate to these characters. Imagine if I'm still in my school uniform and I get dragged into this. So you've got that, but you've also got this kind of Monty Python-esque brand of humor, or this kind of ragweek humor that Douglas Adams just used so brilliantly, not just on Doctor Who, but everywhere else. That's running through this as well. There's a Python-esque quality to all. I do imagine that Fudge's auntie would have probably been played by Terry Jones. That's with the hair up in a handkerchief,
and
a house coat on. To me, it's the same thing. I just thought it was a delight. And the other thing it reminded me of, because I've reread it this week, was and I think this started around the same time too. Well, you got the two school children and the central character trying to figure out, like, track the clues to this problem and catching buzzes and having tea and cakes and things like that. I thought how similar it was to John Pertwee's Worlds of Gummidge TV show, but taking place instead in these back-to-back terrace houses. Oh, it's funny what you can see.
And I would also say that, when you read that strip and you talk about Sharon as the character, in many ways, you could say that it was ahead of its time, because you could easily see Sharon as a 21st century companion.
She's very similar to Rose, I think.
Yeah.
Well, is this where RTD got the inspiration for Martha?
Yeah.
I don't know so much about Martha, but I suspect there's a lot of Rose in the character. In many ways, I think Rose is a combination of Fudge and Sharon, and that elements of the characters are sort of rolled in there. Yeah, I think it's more to the point. I think it's a similar way. I think it's a similar way that Russell depicts domesticity and sort of urban Britain in relation to the outlandish and the out there. I think it's something that he absolutely picked up
Dan,
on.
do you think though that since obviously this story, he was we all know that RTD was a voracious fan of the magazine and the weekly. So could this, since this story really is the quintessential combination of the domestic and the fantastic, could that have impacted him so much that when he came to Doctor Who himself, he wanted that combination of the domestic and the fantastic, because he knew it would work because he remembered Starbeast?
I think it must have done. I can't see how it could not have. It's so similar to his sensibilities.
It's a quote again, isn't it? It's the Yeti on the toilet in Tooting Bec. It's that. Yeah. This has that feel about it. It, as you were saying a few minutes ago, Dan, it's in your neighbourhood, and it's also
you find a meep in your potting shed instead.
Yeah, so exactly.
There you go. You have the fantastic and the domestic right there in this panel.
Yep. And one thing I was going to say as well quickly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I'm calling it now. The Starbeast starts with a news report. Okay, I've got a feeling in the TV episode we're going to see a certain Trinity Wells doing the report that we've not seen since Turn Left.
Absolutely. Well, we've spoken about this on Type 40 before. I'm convinced Trinity Wells is going to be back in the new specials, and it was only when I read this time. Bear in mind, I've read the Starbeast 30, 40 times. It was only reading it this time that I thought this. Angela Rippon, of course. Angela Rippon was a real-life newsreader on BBC television all through the 70s and into the 80s. And at present, she can be seen dancing on Strictly Come Dancing. In fact, by the time we broadcast this, she might have been voted off. But she's recently, aged 80, returned to the screens as a contestant on Strictly Come Dancing.
Angela Rippon did the voice of the newscaster in the Big Finish.
In the Big Finish version. Oh, did she? Oh, wonderful. But she's in this and she pops up every now and again, doesn't she? And I did, when I was reading it, I thought this is absolutely where Russell got Trinity Wells from. Without a shadow of a doubt.
When I was rereading this week, when I was reading the splash panel, the gorgeous splash panel of the neutron star cruiser crashing, along with, this is the 9 o'clock news. Reports are coming in. You know what I thought of? I thought of Aliens of London.
Yeah.
I started flashing to the 9 o'clock news reports of the starship crash.
Looking at all these pages, I mean, in this beautiful collection that you've got the new edition of there, John, it looks like it's very similar. Is yours in black and white, John, in the new book?
Yeah, it's all still black and white.
I thought it would be.
So I'm
This is so much better in black and white. Obviously, I'm an artist myself, a graphic artist, and I've done comic book work as well. You can tell when something, particularly somebody who's as talented as Dave Gibbons, who uses shadow so well, it's very, very graphic. So Dave didn't just pencil this. Usually in comics, for the people out there who don't know, you have a penciler and you have an inker. So somebody lays down the basic pencil lines, and then a second person will come over and work over the top of their work and add the ink. But Dave Gibbons, to make this project, this commission worth his while, leaving 2000 AD for Doctor Who Weekly, he insisted on being the sole artist on this. He was going to pencil it and ink it because there was only 5 pages per week, which counted as a full-time gig for him. But when you look at each page, this doesn't work colorized. There's been several colorized editions of this, in fact, over the last 2 or 3 decades. IDW put one out. Marvel actually colored it themselves, and I think they've colored it twice. But it's only when you go back and you read this, you think, no, this is best enjoyed. This was meant to be seen in black and white. The way the shadows fall, the negative spaces that, as you say, you see right from the very beginning there, Gary, just the bits of grit that are coming off the engines. This was never designed to be colorized.
I mean, it's a beautiful, I mean, even that picture at the very bottom, you can see the people standing in their doorways looking up at this crashing. And a lot of times, if the colorizing is done badly, it's washed out. It loses a lot of the detail. So yeah, this is art in the truest sense, and so you want to be able to see it in its best light.
I completely, utterly agree. So yeah, originally these were trickled out in 4 or 5 page chunks throughout several issues. I think it was about 8 issues of Doctor Who Weekly, wasn't it? All in black and white. And they used to collect them in summer specials and things like that. So readers would get, when they hand over, I think it was 12p, wasn't it? The first issue of Doctor Who Weekly cost 12 pence, something along those lines. So they'd hand over their small change, their pocket money, and they get a chunk of this story every single week, in the same way that they would get a chunk of Doctor Who every Saturday tea time. So it'd come with a cliffhanger as well. So again, it preserves that safety of Doctor Who that people had when they were watching it in their living rooms. You got a similar thing in black and white form in this newsprint comic book every single week. It's a delight to revisit them. I mean, I've got the original Doctor Who weeklies. Some of them are in a bit of a state. Some of them are very disheveled. I do go back to them now and again, but obviously being able to see them crisply reprinted is even better. All of the story, I mean, that's just the first page. You could literally go through this story page by page, just gushing, John.
Yeah. And it's one of those stories, I do take my time on it because, I'm reading it, but I'm spending time focusing on the art. The art is beautiful, but the text is great as well. And when you get to that point where you've just got that almost comedy element of the thought bubble of, Beep the Meep, and he's basically being cuddled and he's like talking in his head about, how I'm going to drain your blood or something along those lines. It's just
because that's unique, isn't it? Of all the mediums that we get told stories in, that's pretty much unique to comic books. They don't do it so much in comics now, do they? The thought bubble thing.
I don't think comics do thought bubbles at all anymore.
No. It's a shame, isn't it?
It is a shame because it allows the strip to tell a story that's unique. You could do it on television by having a voiceover, but that always sounds like mega cheesy. So here we have a story which, in this form, only really works in comic strip form. I mean, we don't know. One of the reasons why I felt that I was okay to reread this, it wasn't going to spoil me too much for the TV version, is I think the framework of this story will be there in Russell's version, but there's going to be so much new in joy. It won't be hindered for me in any way. So I think that what the elements that Russell chooses to pick up to play with, and those that he casts aside, I think it'll be very interesting to see and very amusing. But I'm sure that his version will be just as complete and just as full of the uniquely televisual as this is, loaded up with something that is so comic booky that makes every turn of the page sort of so full of excitement, even now after 45 years nearly since this was written.
I think some of the story beats for time, for example, the whole thing about, the bomb in the doctor's stomach. I think because for this current version, it's not just the story that he's going to have to service. You have to service the reintroduction of Dawn and her family and all that. So there's a lot of other things outside of the original story you've got to take time to service. So I think even time-wise, you are just forced not to skip over some of the side beats from the original story.
Because you're right, they are side beats. They're to maneuver the characters to a specific place, aren't they?
Yeah.
For the actual story to happen, for the conflict to happen. You can nudge people to the conflict in different ways. It's just important that the conflict happens and that the characters involved in it are relatable and amusing, and you laugh, you cry, blah 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 blah.
There's you can already see for the trailer, the bit where you're in the hallway and there's like laser blasts going off and whatnot. I know exactly what scene that's referring to, so I know that's coming. But I'm really hoping, please don't let me down, that they escape at some point from the RAF on a double-decker London bus.
Yes, I was just going to say that because that's like the big splash page to begin the second half. And then you have the bus driver. Again, ordinary mix of fantastic. Hey, you can't bring pets on here, even though clearly it looks like that. And when
the doctor leads Beep onto the bus with his scarf as a lead, as if he's a dog. Or
I mean, you talked before about the Douglas Adams type's humor. The one thing that struck me is one of the cliffhangers, I guess, in the original story was where the doctor realizes that the Meep is evil, and it's like, oh, and I've left Sharon in his grasp. Bump up cliffhanger. The very next scene of the next part is him sitting down and having cake and tea. I'm going, wait a minute. You just realized that she's in danger, and now you're over here having tea and cake with the Warath warriors. It's like, but it made sense in the story. It was like, okay, sure.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think also, again, that's a funny moment for me, where you got the Fourth Doctor's scarf round Beep the Meep as a lead, and then you've got the thought bubble again. I think, and it's something similar, like you will pay for this humiliation or something like that.
And this story was a perfect Fourth Doctor story because
so playful.
Even reading it now, I could hear Tom Baker. We know it was adapted in Big Finish, and Tom Baker did it, and he was great in the adaptation. But even just sitting in my chair reading the story, I totally heard Tom Baker in my head. It was totally true to his character. I could see the season 17 version of him saying this, and he was, of all the doctors, I think that he was the most larger than life doctor, which makes him the perfect doctor for comics.
Yeah.
And even though Pertwee was the action man, Tom, particularly in the sort of the middle of his era, was actually quite a physical character, wasn't he? I think of how he was in Seeds of Doom in particular, sort of jumping through skylights, and he was a very physically capable man, and he could run at a real pelt in Destiny of the Daleks, for example. And here we see him sort of ducking from laser bolts and things like that, and it's all it does feel completely fitting with his. You couldn't illustrate William Hartnell's Doctor doing that. But what I really liked was, and this is again very Williams, is most stories, a lot of stories, K9 would be incapacitated quite early, simply so they didn't have to take him out on location somewhere that they couldn't make the model work. But in this, doesn't one of the warriors sort of knock K9's head off? So he's out of the action. And then as they are opening fire on the Doctor, you see he picks up K9 under his arm and runs into the TARDIS with his head sort of flapping like that. Pure
even better than that, when the Doctor fixes him, he's got it wrong, and K9 thinks he's a cat, so he's going meow, and that's just great.
Or he's hissing. The whole rest of the story, he hisses at the warriors, like.
And the Doctor, there's that beautiful panel, and this is what I mean about the thing only really working in black and white, because it's completely white out. So there's no scenery in the console room or anything like that. It's just the Doctor on all fours, imitating a dog with his tongue out, a K9 next to him, just looking at him as if to say, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, it's a comedy moment, but it's great.
And similar to the operation to put the bomb in the Fourth Doctor's stomach, and they're going, "What is this thing sticking out?" And he's got his tongue sticking out of his mouth while he's unconscious.
It's just picked up like that.
Yeah. And one thing it popped in my head. You mentioned before, but this was originally 8 weeks. And I was thinking to myself last night as I was rereading it, 8 weeks for kids at that age, whether it be 8 to say 13, 14,
basically
whatever, is a heck of a long time.
It's half a school. It's half a school term in Britain.
You're living. So they were experiencing this story and these characters for 2 months, which is a long time, which is why I think so many of these early stories stick in your memory, whether it's Iron Legion or Star Beast or whatever, because it wasn't like that you read it all in one go and then went on to the next one. These are things that it's kind of like a TV show with cliffhangers. It's like you spend the week thinking, how's the Doctor going to get out of it? Same thing with these. How's the Doctor going to get out of this comic cliffhanger? But it's a story that goes over 2 months of your life. And that was actually, if you think about it, that's got to be an element to why these stories are so remembered and well loved.
When it was announced that the Star Beast was going to be adapted, that this was going to be the first one, a few people were surprised, because I think it was within a week or two of Tennant and Tate's return being announced. I think we saw them initially filming in Camden with other cast members, but it was the following week, I think, that we saw them on the streets of Cardiff being stalked by creatures which really looked like Wrath warriors. Yeah. And there was just some white shape. And so a lot of us immediately recognized those markers. Well, are they doing this? A lot of people were dead against it. Were very resistant to the idea. Has Russell T Davies run out of ideas? He's been away from the show for years. Why has he come back and he's nicked somebody else's story? Do you think that's a problem?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with adapting it. I mean, again, they adapted Dalek from Jubilee, essentially, didn't they? When it came back, and
Human Nature,
and if it's
that
good
was a Virgin book initially, wasn't it?
If it's good enough, adapt away. That's what I say. And Russell T Davies, he's a great writer. He's superb with scripts. If anybody can adapt it, it's him. So I'm just looking forward to it. I'm always going to love the comic strip. That's going to be number one for me. I love the Big Finish audio, but
Dave Gibbons and Pat Mills, it turns out, were there on location with David Tennant during some of the filming on the Star Beast, and this was only recently shared by Pat Mills on social media. He's had to sit on this for nearly 18 months, but then again, haven't we all? I just realised David Tennant's a tall guy, but both those gentlemen are just as tall.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
You know what I wouldn't give, knowing that Tennant was of the right age at that time.
Yeah.
And probably just as big a fan of 2000 AD. I want to be a fly on the wall as those three guys are sitting around for an hour and David Tennant is being the complete fanboy about 2000 AD and about the fact that they wrote Iron Legion and Star Beast and these other ones. I can only imagine that conversation. I would so love to hear that.
I got a feeling that I get a feeling that he's like all of us, and if anyone ever gets a chance to watch it, I think the documentary, which is my number one comic book documentary called Future Shock, and it's the history of 2000 AD, I highly recommend it because they really did, re-energize the comic book industry, not just the UK. I think they did it worldwide.
And they made childhoods as well. I was just thinking how this picture, if anybody's just coming and sort of looking at the channel, and they've just seen this. This looks like a publicity shot for the new series of Top Gear, maybe.
Imagine Pat Mills on Top Gear.
Which one is Hammond?
Well, David Tennant is Hammond, obviously. Dave Gibbons is Clarkson, and I believe that James May is a dead ringer for Pat Mills.
Yeah, there we are. Right.
You heard it here first. This isn't the first time either that because some people have said, well, Stephen Moffat would never do this, except for the fact that he did. He turned the Lodger. The Lodger. So The Lodger, the TV episode from Series 5, written by Gareth Roberts, that was originally a comic strip written by Gareth Roberts called The Lodger. Mm-hmm. So there is a precedent. There is a precedent for this. I think it's absolutely fine. And to see the images now over the last, say, 6 or 7 weeks, as the publicity has stepped up considerably with trailers and beautiful promo pictures. Yeah. The production values, the increased production values as we head into all new Doctor Who, it couldn't be in safest of hands. If Dave Gibbons and Pat Mills are happy, I know they've probably made a couple of bob off this. It's fair to say they're going to be pretty happy for something they wrote and drew 45 years ago. but I have every reason to expect great results from this. It's going to be faithful to this beautiful comic strip. If you were to tell somebody who's never read these comic strips, who's either never heard of them or has been deliberately not reading them because they didn't want to spoil the TV episode, John, what would you say? How would you describe it to them? Should they still read it?
I think they should still read it. It'll be similar to me, really. I think enjoy the comic strip. It's wonderful. There's nothing better, in my opinion. But the TV episode is going to be different to it. So just treat them as separate things, and then enjoy the episode when it comes. Because, you know, and I'd go so far as well to say, if you don't like to read comic strips, listen to the Big Finish audios, because if you're out and about or you're busy, that's great fun to listen to. So I'd highly recommend that. But I would just, if people are like me, and if they read that comic strip, they won't go, "Oh, I've ruined the episode now." It'll ramp their excitement up to about 100%, because they'll be like, "I cannot wait to see what they've done with it." You know, it's going to be brilliant.
How would you score this story? How many meeps out of 5 would you give the Starbeast, John?
Oh, it's 5 meeps from me. Yeah.
How about you, Gary?
5. Absolutely.
It's an easy.
I probably, if I would have had a camera on as I was rereading this week, I was probably sitting there for however long it took with like a huge smile on my face.
Yeah.
You know, when I was digging into like the art, we've all talked about, you know, really pouring into the details of Dave Gibbons' gorgeous art. I mean, you can't, it's just like, you know, it's like instant happiness.
Yeah.
Can't recommend this highly enough. So I mean, I bought all of those in weekly form. They're all a bit dog-eared now, but they're all bagged and boarded. But so are these. This was the very first time I rebought it, was in the mid-'80s. And no, in fact, no, this could have been the second time, because there was a Marvel UK reprint, but I picked up these. So I've got this. I've had this in my collection, my comic book collection, never mind my Doctor Who collection, for over 35 years. That's issue 1 of Marvel's standard comic book Doctor Who series, with brand new cover by Dave Gibbons there, which has been an inspiration behind that poster. So it's believed. I can't really consider how it can't not have been. Then I've got issue 2 there as well, there with Sharon and the Doctor plunging from the gantry and Beep the Meep in that wonderful Walker thing.
I really hope they have that high chair.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But these are fabulous. These were colorized. They were, and if you notice, Beep is blue.
Yeah,
and they haven't gone with that. Beep was also blue in most of the early colorized versions in classic comics. I think you've got the classic comics one as well. There, haven't you, Gary? I've got that.
And then IDW then later on did another recolorization, their own colorization, when they reprinted all the Marvel stuff, or the Marvel UK stuff.
So many beeps. Seeing beeps before your eyes will all be beeped out.
There you go. An IDW, that's the bottom right. Which one of these 4 how do you rank these guys?
All the black and whites by a country mile. Yeah. Then I'd go with the white meep directly underneath it, with the one on the top right in 3rd, because I think the potting shed's much more what a potting shed actually looks like. And then it'd be but I think the meep is better in lighter blue. So for me, it's got to be anything with a white meep in. That's.
I think that bottom right one. I think when IDW did it, they tried to go for like a softer. Yeah, they used a softer color palette for all. It looks better.
It looks better. It looks better in many ways, but they just made some really strange calls. And blue walls.
No,
the
original's the best.
Yeah.
Did either of you have a shed like that when you were kids?
Yes, still have.
Did that and a coal bunker.
Oh, blimey. Yes, retire to your coal bunker and read your graphic novel or your original weekly.
John has a lounge chair in his coal bunker now where he reads all his graphic.
Tell anyone about it.
A couple of deck chairs, John. That's what you usually find. Covered in spiders' webs. A few plant pots.
I am only about 4 foot tall, so I can get into anything, quite frankly.
You heard it here first, everybody. You heard it here first. Doctor Who is back on Saturday, the 25th of November, with brand new episodes, 3 of them, in fact. But the call kicks off with The Star Beast by Russell T Davies, adapted from the classic comic strip by Pat Mills and John Wagner and Dave Gibbons. We've been waiting so long for this Doctor Who. A whole evening's worth of Doctor Who kicks off from 7:30 p.m. on BBC One until 7:30 with Doctor Who on BBC One, and then Doctor Who Unleashed from 7:30 till 8 over on BBC Three. Whovember. Whovember is with us, and although it is only the last week of Whovember, we're going to get any of it. At least it's here. We're there. Reviews of the brand new TV edition of the Star Beast coming to Type 40 very, very soon. Don't miss that. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what's coming next and when it's coming at you. Thanks for joining me, John. Thanks for coming back, Gary. More comic strip talk. I think we'll have to do this again. I think we'll have to do an update of this after the fact. But for now, enjoy the special both. I'll speak to you on the other side. Same to you guys out there. Take care.